So with all this talk about election fraud, let me tell you why I'm concerned that the results of the election as they're being reported might not be entirely accurate. And I think the first few reasons why, if I'm making the case, have nothing to do necessarily with intentional fraud, in that even if there was no indication of any sort of like shenanigans happening or anything weird happening, which there is indication of that, but even without that, there would still be a reason to go back and look again and make sure. There'd still be reason to be concerned that the results aren't accurate because, number one, it's an extremely close election with the results in some states coming down to less than 1%, and that's already within the realm of where you can have a recount. And when you've got a hotly contested election and comparatively few votes are going to determine the results, then there's reason to go back and make sure everything was done right. Number two, we have never seen so many ballots mailed in, so many ballots sent in before the election, early voting, this mass universal mail-in voting. We've never seen this before. It's never been anything like this. So this is a whole new world we're in. It's not a world we should be in, because it should be you vote by showing up to the polls on election day, and voting begins when voting begins on election day, and it ends when voting ends on election day. There's no submitting votes before, certainly no submitting votes after. That's the way it should go, unless you're active duty military or something, and you've got a really good excuse. Everybody else should have to be there, bright smiling faces, on election day to vote in person. But that's not the way it's working. And so there's all kinds of problems that we know of. There are problems at a minimum. And that's just from what we know. Massive delays, ballots seeming to appear out of nowhere, things are being reported and then backtracked and everything else. We need to understand what's happening here, I think. And it would be insane to just take the results as they were first reported when the states have been already backtracking. And it's pretty clear that the people in the middle of counting the votes and tabulating it don't know exactly what they're doing, and they're pretty overwhelmed. Number three, there's a widespread belief that Donald Trump is a real-life fascist dictator who's effectively murdered hundreds of thousands of people and plans to murder thousands more. That's obviously false and ridiculous, but it's what people believe. It's what they've been told. And so this creates an enormous, perhaps overwhelming incentive to cheat. And it's another reason to go back and check again. If you thought that you were counting votes for Hitler, wouldn't you feel like you want to cheat? Wouldn't you at least feel tempted to? This is what the media has told people, and there are millions of Americans who seem to believe it. And then we get into some of the suspicious things that we know about. They taped up the windows in Michigan where they were counting ballots, taped the windows up so that nobody could see them doing it. What could be a legitimate reason for taping up the windows so no one can see? In North Carolina, they're now saying they won't update their total vote count until next week, November 12th. You've got election officials who are just taking their time. They're going to take a sabbatical, go up to a mountaintop to contemplate the mysteries of existence. And I don't know, they'll announce the results sometime next spring. We're all supposed to sit around. That's very strange. In Pennsylvania, they're allowing ballots to be counted even if they don't arrive until 3 days after the election, and even if they're not clearly postmarked for the deadline. Okay? For before the deadline, that is. So there's reason to be worried about that too, especially the stuff that's going on in Pennsylvania. And especially when you consider that Pennsylvania officials are in the can for Biden and they're not hiding it. The Pennsylvania Attorney General announced a day before the election that Biden would win. The Secretary of State of Pennsylvania, who's in charge of the vote count, she said on Twitter a couple of years ago that using the title president before the word Trump demeans the office of the presidency. That's her view. This is an extremely partisan person who hates Trump so much that to simply call him president is demeaning to the office in her mind. And she's in charge of the vote count. Is there reason at least to suspect that maybe those late ballots that they're allowing are being allowed and the rules are being loosened and changed at the last minute because these people who hate Trump and want him gone? Is there reason to maybe possibly consider that and be worried about that? Yeah, of course there is. Of course there is. So count every vote, yes, but make sure they're legal and make sure it's done right. That's my position. I don't think it shouldn't be controversial. It shouldn't be scandalous or anything like that. I think we all should be able to agree on this, but we can't, and that's a pretty sad state of affairs.